With this photograph of these two sisters, we will explore how we can use the film grain filter in order to add some film grain to this photograph. Well, the first step that we want to take is to copy our background layer. We can do that really easily by pressing Command or Control J. Next, let's name this new layer Grain. From here, we will navigate up to our Filter pull-down menu. We're going to go to Artistic and then choose Film Grain. Once we open up the film grain dialog, what we need to do first is deconstruct our controls right here. How can we work with these different controls? Well, you'll notice that we have first grain. We can either have a smaller grain size by decreasing this, or we can have a really large grain size. All right, well, how then does that relate to highlight area and intensity? Well, these two controls actually work together. If we decrease intensity all the way so that we have no intensity, well then as we change our highlight area, nothing is happening. Yet, as we increase intensity, we can then affect the highlight area in a different way. And what this is trying to do is help us blend this grain into these different areas of our photograph. So if we take that highlight area up, you see that more and more of the image is being affected. Intensity controls how far this is being affected, how bright that is making that particular highlight area. Alright, well let's go ahead and take these sliders all the way back to 0. Here's what we typically want to do. First, increase the grain amount. We want to look at the grain and see how it's blending into the image. And again, typically we want a pretty small amount, but I'm going to increase this just a little bit higher than I normally would so that you can see how the effect is affecting the image. Alright, well next we'll increase that highlight area and we'll work on our intensity. And we're just going to determine how much of that highlight area we want to have affected. Now in this case, because this image has a lot of highlights there and a lot of contrast because of the time of day that it was captured at, we're not going to go too high with those values. Next, I'll go back to my film grain and I'm actually going to lower those values back to something a little bit more reasonable, and then I'll click OK in order to apply this. Well, the great thing about using this filter is that it's already kind of helping me out with my highlights and my shadows and trying to get the film grain into particular areas. Let's take a look. There we have that before and then also our after. So not only is it adding this effect, but it's also affecting the overall brightness and contrast in the image. Well, the next step, of course, is going to be to somehow blend this into our photograph. We've already seen that one of the things that we can do is turn off the visibility of this layer, go to our channels panel, and then we can tap into one of these channels, red, green, or blue. Now, typically I gravitate towards the red channel because it's the brightness channel that has all the information where the skin is really bright. And in this case, I think that will work well. So let's Command or Control click that channel, and then we'll go back, target this RGB composite view, and go to our Layers panel. Now in the Layers panel, we'll click on the eye icon for the visibility of our grain layer. And what I'm going to do here is zoom in so you can actually see this. And then the next step, of course, is to add that layer mask. Here we'll click on the Add Layer Mask icon. And what that does for us is it just allows the grain through with different intensities. Shift click the mask and you'll see what I mean. Here's that before. Grain's just everywhere. It's too uniform. It doesn't look natural or real or for that matter even interesting. Shift click the mask again. And now we're starting to see something which looks really good. Alright, here we have it. There's our before and then our after. All that we'd want to do here at this juncture is perhaps modify this grain a bit. We could do that either by lowering our opacity. Sometimes that's really nice to do, just softens that overall effect. Other times it's fun to experiment with our blending modes like soft light. In that case, it really backs off the grain, makes it blend into the image. Here's that overall before and then after. And also we can go up to our mask panel. And in our mask panel with the mask targeted, we can decrease the density of how it's limiting this grain in certain areas, or we can even soften these edges, and sometimes that just gives a little bit more of a diffusion in regards to how the grain is setting over the area of the photograph. Alright, well let's move this just a bit so we can evaluate. Here we have it before and then after. Well, here at this juncture, I like the soft light effect, I like the blending, but I'm not really into this color saturation. It's overdone. Well, in order to get rid of that, here's an easy technique that you can use. What you can do is merge everything to the top. To do that, on a Mac, press Shift Option Command E. On Windows, press Shift Alt Control E. Next, we want to go ahead and name this merged. Now here what we can do is turn off this visibility of the layer with the grain on it because the grain has now been merged to top. Next, we can change the blending mode of this layer to something like luminosity. Luminosity will allow us to use the brightness value of this layer and not shift the color so much. Here we can see it before and then, now after. So in this case, this layer just has that brightness and also the grain in there, and it's not affecting the color saturation so much. Now other times you may want a little bit of color saturation, and if that's the case, what you can do is always leave this layer on, lower the opacity until you like what it looks like, and then you can modify this by adding your top layer as well and kind of come up with a combination of these layers together so that you can have that nice result of this one on luminosity up top and then also the underline layer with a little bit of that color as well. And here with this image, I kind of like that. It's somewhere in the middle, and let's evaluate that overall before and after. Here we have it, our final image before and then now after.